October 2025 is the 200th anniversary of the birth of Johann Strauss the Younger. I'll release a tribute video with soundtrack on the beautiful Blue Danube, Strauss's most famous work, the earliest million-selling worldwide hit, million-selling of sheet music, that is. Performing the Blue Danube with Musesounds samples gives the opportunity to feel for the Viennese lilt, one of music's happiest grooves. The Viennese lilt is a way of playing 3/4 time that makes you feel like dancing. It's one of the ways a Strauss waltz bends time, certainly not the only way. A typical performance of the Blue Danube will have speed bumps separating the individual waltzes, where you slow down at the end of one and take the first few bars of the next to get up to speed again. It'll have dramatic pauses and hesitations, romantic rubato in the introduction and coda. The milking of the tempo and dynamics for all their worth goes right back to Strauss himself, and there's no shame in demonstrative extravagance. But once a waltz is up to speed and running, it should have rhythm. It's 3/4 time, so that rhythm is pa pa, except faster, because those Viennese couples are spinning round at 3 beats a second, and not even beats either. The principle of the Viennese lilt is the first pa of pa pa comes early. In a real orchestra, the speed bumps, the larger scale ritenutos and accelerandos are conducted, but the lilt isn't. Like a jazz or swing or rock rhythm section playing in the pocket, the players synchronize to the lilt by feel. With a virtual orchestra played through a notation program, we can't play the lilt in the moment, but we can try out alternatives and choose from them the danciest. Here's the structure of a typical Strauss waltz. Any of the Strausses. Johann's father, Johann Senior, set it in place, but Johann Junior and his brothers all adopted it, with modifications. There's an introduction, where the dancers may be ambling round the floor looking for partners, or the concert audience is settling in, so the music is building anticipation. Then there are 5 waltzes, each with 2 parts, an A section and a B section, that may simply play one after the other, binary form AB, or ternary form ABA, and there may or may not be repeats. Then there's a coda, which is where the composer can show off, perhaps develop some of the themes in the main section, and though there may be danceable recapitulations, there might be more pauses, gaps, drama, as the music comes to a satisfying conclusion. This particular structure is for the Blue Danube, and let's quickly go through the themes of the 5 waltzes. Theme 1A is most familiar. Then there's 1B. Here's a snippet of 2A. Then Strauss modulates for 2B. Then 3A. 3B. There's a short interlinking section that I've not included in the diagram to modulate to theme 4A. On to theme 4B. Another modulating section and we're into theme 5A. And finally 5B. So we've got 10 themes and they're coupled into 5 waltzes. Often the 2 themes in a waltz contrast in some way. The first might be softer, the second loud, or you could have something like Waltz 2 where the second part is in a different key, which all raises the question, are there really 5 waltzes or 10 sub-waltzes glued together back to back that could be shuffled into some other order? Some themes return in the coda. They appear as they did originally or with revision or heavily reworked, which I've shown with square brackets. In fact, variations of theme 1A appear in both the coda and the introduction. No wonder that tune is the Blue Danube. All of the 10 sub-waltzes can lilt. But how? And all the same way or different? Let's try some rhythmic styles, listen to each, move to each, try to figure out the danciest way of playing each part of the Blue Danube. But wait, there are 10 sub-waltzes. Are we really going to listen to 9 different versions of each? Because, dear listener, I am going to offer 9 alternatives for the lilt. Well, I've listened and tried to dance to quite a few and made decisions on what I think is the catchiest lilt for each sub-waltz. In this video, I'll play all 9 versions of one sub-waltz so you can make your own decision the way I did, then share snippets of a few others to illustrate my conclusions. First, a quick introduction to each lilt. To illustrate, I'll show the first notes of Waltz 1A in that rhythm because it's so familiar, even though in performance the beginning of 1A usually starts very slow and gathers speed gradually. At the same time, I'll play a simple 4-bar figure with that lilt. Ground 0 is no lilt at all. Play in strict or straight 3/4. Here it is. Now the basis of the Viennese lilt is the second beat comes early, so the obvious thing is to steal a little from the first beat, stick it on the front of the second beat and leave the third alone. Here's stealing a semiquaver or 16th note, a rhythm I've called steal. The simplicity of the piano umpar part makes the rhythmic deviation stand out. A full orchestra version doesn't sound as starkly out of time. Even so, steal is a quite strong lilt. Here's a gentler version, taking just a demi-semiquaver, which I've called pinch, and even gentler yet, I call it touch. I also wanted to try something a little more like swing time, so I created this daylight robbery I call swing, and a gentler version that I've called sway. My names aren't that important because once I have all the alternatives, I'm going to put them in order of liltness and give each an index that turns up the lilt progressively from 0 to 8. Everything so far leaves the third beat alone, but is that right? Let's see what orchestras actually do. Here's a paper by Elaine Chu. Her figure 4 is startling. She's used music analysis software to find out where the beats actually occurred in 2 performances of the Blue Danube at Vienna Philharmonic New Year concerts. The red triangles are from a performance conducted by Herbert von Karajan, one of the greatest conductors ever, and the blue squares from Georges Prétré, also no slouch. Look at the central bar from quarter note index 5 to index 8. Karajan's first beat, index 5, lasted just over 0.3 of a second, and his second beat lasted over 0.75 of a second, well over twice as long. The third beat, somewhere in the middle. You can see that both conductors are giving the second beat much more time than the others. With more clever software, Professor Chu turned the performances into notation, which doesn't look like 3/4 at all. When I first saw this, I thought that, although the long second beat is characteristic of the Viennese lilt, this interpretation was more to do with the slow start, that neither conductor was really dancing at this point. But then, a few paragraphs below figure 4 we read, Karajan's performance could be captured with a constant 5/8 meter after the initial slow start. Well, if it's good enough for von Karajan, it's good enough for me. Here's the lilt style. Professor Chu's paper comments that Prétré's rhythm was much more varied, but the transcription has 2 7/8 bars, and it seems worthwhile trying that alongside the Karajan meter, because it's an example of weighting the first and third beats equally. Finally, because Karajan seemed extreme to me, I added a gentler version of the short first beat, equal length second and third pattern. Here it is. This is a rhythmic figure I like. Elsewhere on this channel there's my 5 Rivers Suite. Much of the middle movement uses this rhythm, which I've thought of as a backward or reverse tresillo. Here's the tresillo rhythm, which is a building block of rumba, bossa nova, all those Latin rhythms. If you play it backwards, you get this, the reverse tresillo. I never dreamt a better name might be the Viennese lilt, but maybe it is. Now, here are the lengths of the first beat, assuming always that a bar lasts a second. Here as decimals. Now let's order them by deviation from 3/4. They're close enough together that when you're listening it's difficult to tell 2 adjacent ones apart, but they do feel differently, so that's why I've tried them all. Now, examples. If you don't want to hear all 9 versions of Waltz 1A, or as soon as you get fed up, skip to the next chapter. On the other hand, if you want to test your rhythm listening skill, I have shuffled the order of playback and we will reveal which version is playing only halfway through. The only tempo variation in these examples is the lilt. There's no slow start or slow finish, no internal rubato. You have the whole waltz to just feel the groove. That's 32 bars, each exactly 1 second long. Here we go. So, which did you prefer? Before I share my opinion, not just on 1A but on the other sub-waltzes too, let's see what the greatest conductors and greatest orchestras of the world actually play. Here's another academic paper, this time by Professor Yang about how performance of the Blue Danube differs between Viennese orchestras, especially the Vienna Philharmonic playing at New Year's concerts, and other world-class orchestras. It's a more comprehensive study than Professor Chu's because Professor Yang analysed 34 different recordings. Also, he looked at 3 levels of tempo variation, of which the lowest was the beat level, or what I've been calling the lilt. Here's one of Professor Yang's diagrams showing the average beat ratios in Waltz 1A for 22 Viennese orchestra performances, of which the first 17 were live New Year's concerts. In each cluster of 3 columns, the blue left bar is the length of the first beat divided by the length of the first beat, so it's always 1. The orange middle bar is the length of the second beat divided by the first. The grey right bar is the third beat divided by the first. Then there's this diagram for 12 non-Viennese orchestras. The colouring is different, but the meaning of the bars is the same. We can produce a similar diagram for the 9 lilts we've listened to. Now, because the first column in these graphs is always 1, it's redundant, so there's really just 2 numbers, the second beat ratio and the third beat ratio, for each performance, which suggests we can plot this data on a scatter diagram. This combines Professor Yang's 2 diagrams by putting the second beat ratio horizontally and the third beat ratio vertically, marking each performance with a single blob. The Viennese ones are in blue and the rest in red. It's not that there's 2 separate islands exactly, but the Viennese performances certainly tend more to the top right and the rest to the bottom left, which means Viennese orchestras lilt more, at least for Waltz 1A. Overlay the lilts we've been listening to, and we see that several are more extreme than even the Viennese. In fact, swing and the 5/8 carry-on lilt are off the chart. Zoom out, and there they are. There's a puzzle here because the blue carry-on point is Professor Yang's result for the same performance as the yellow carry-on point for Professor Chu. My guess is Prof Yang's tight sample from measures 2 to 16 effectively separated the lilt from other tempo variation, whereas that was somehow included in Professor Chu's comment about carry-on playing in 5/8. Let's zoom back into the busier area. If you prefer sway, you're feeling the dance like an Austrian. If you prefer touch, you're near the heart of the rest of the world mainstream. And if you prefer pinch, you're between the two. Anything else is unorthodox for 1A, but go with what you feel. I preferred a middling pinch. Here are my favourite lilts for all the A sub-waltzes. I chose these by feel, but I think I see a pattern. Some tunes can take a lot of lilt. Here is 2A played with swing. Though I chose the slightly gentler steel, I think this shows how heavy lilts give energy. But when the tune has explicit syncopation, as 3A does, lilt seems to subtract a little of the bounce, so I prefer less, even 0. When a melody has a figure that I habitually think of as even, like the arpeggios of 1A, that too pulls back my preferred lilt. If you agree with my take that of themes 1A, 2A and 3A that 2A is the most liltable and 3A the least, then I think you'll also agree with what's coming now. Here are my choices for the B sections. Remarkable coincidence. Now, of course, this is subjective based on my judgment, and even I am sceptical of that. Though I tried to feel the B section lilts independently of the A sections, I know the structure of the Blue Danube. I know which pairs go together. That probably biased me. Even so, my tentative explanation of my choices for the A sub-waltzes seems to be confirmed with the Bs. Take 3B, for example. The syncopation at the beginning of the third bar would be fluffed if we were lilting, not to mention how those quaver figures before it seem to call for evenness. I was most surprised at how well 2B lilts. Before I did this, I would have said that Waltz 2 was the one with the most contrast between A and B sections, but Strauss knew better. He paired a perfectly compatible Viennese lilt, just as he did all the way down. The 5 waltzes are 5 waltzes, not 10 semi-waltzes glued arbitrarily, and the lilt ebbs and flows between waltzes. Incidentally, Professor Yang also looked at beat ratios for Waltz 5B. Remember this diagram for 1A? Here's the equivalent for 5B. My choice of pinch for 1A was middle-in. For 5B, it's clearly Viennese. Here's how individual performances moved from 1A to 5B. This shows that varying the lilt from waltz to waltz is something everyone does. So there's more than one way to lilt, more than one groove, and we're free to range between Viennese and non-Viennese lilts as we feel the individual dances, but not within dances. I've decided I'm going to have much bigger speed bumps between dances than between sub-waltzers, because I think maybe Strauss intended us, players and dancers, to find the groove and stay in it, and only wind down at the end of the full waltz, have a breather, then up again into the next dance, finding its natural lilt. In my next video, I'll look at higher level tempo shaping, the speed bumps, the rubato, and the dramatic pauses.